Hello and welcome. Russia has basically already lost the war. Not necessarily in military means, it might still win over Ukraine in the long end, but it has completely lost in political terms. Why? I'm going to explain it to you in this video. Karl von Clausewitz said roughly 200 years ago, war is the continuation of politics by other means. That means war in itself is a part of politics, and it isn't waged for war itself. It is waged to achieve political goals. But what were Russian political goals? Putin wanted to reduce NATO's threat or perceived threat to Russia, and he wanted to secure his western border. NATO now is getting two strong new member states, and is extending its border with Russia by 1,340 kilometers. Now, to be perfectly honest, not all of this territory is usable for big invasions. Actually, a big part of it is not. But that does not mean it's without relevance. Finland, as well as Norway, is only 100 kilometers away from Murmansk, where the most important naval base of Russia is in a big war. Because there are the SSBN stationed, the submarines with ballistic missiles that are there for a second strike if Russia has been taken out with nuclear weapons to retaliate. Those are now a mere 100 kilometers stationed away from Finnish territory. But not just that. The lines of communication to Murmansk coming from St. Petersburg are all along the Finnish border with also just a mere 100 kilometers distance. So more or less the whole line of communication up to Murmansk is within the range of weapon systems like the HIMARS from now on. The Baltic Sea now is a NATO lake. Every other nation bordering the Baltic Sea, except for Russia itself, is now a member of NATO or about to become a member of NATO. In times of war with NATO, this makes the whole sea and every ship inside of this completely unusable for the Russians. The NATO itself is massively rearming. The budgets are almost exploding. Great Britain, the United Kingdom, has just announced it is going to increase its defense budget to 3% of the BIP until 2030. That's more or less a double the amount in financial terms at that point. Poland is going to increase its armed forces to a degree where one might say more or less once they're finished with acquiring everything they are ordering right now, they seem to be more or less capable of stopping the Russians all by themselves unless the Russians mobilize. So the peacetime Russian army should be more or less on par or even weaker than the Polish army once the Poles have finished their rearmament. When it comes to Ukraine, Putin has achieved what 3 decades of Ukrainian presidents have not achieved. He created a Ukrainian fate, a joint shared Ukrainian fate, together with a myth that justifies that is a foundation myth. That's the word I was looking for. He has handed over Ukraine's from the west to the east a joint foundation myth which combines them, which unites them. And he's even reached the community he has created. The union within Ukraine has reached to a point where Russian-speaking Ukrainians are starting to speak Ukrainian even at home. Now, obviously, this is not universal, but there are endless examples of Ukrainians that switch to speaking Ukrainians and will likely even teach their kids Ukrainian as a first language from now on. He is basically de-Russifying Ukraine in this way. Until 2014, Russia was still kind of the big brother. Now it's a mortal enemy. If he should win in Ukraine, he might gain strategic depth, but he's buying it with a huge strip of a hostile population towards the Russian armed forces. At the same time, he would get an even longer border to NATO. When we talk about international things, his soft power is basically no more existence. In the latest votes, there were these huge powers like Nicaragua, North Korea, Syria, Cuba, Belarus, and Eritrea, who would find themselves on the Russian side supporting Russia. That was it. That was all. Russia has also turned itself basically into a ludicrous example of itself and has discredited itself towards China when it comes to being a potential ally. Before the war, Russia was considered to be a strong nation, a strong military power. Now, China can only see Russia as the source for cheap raw materials anymore. Russia's so-called NATO, as we might call it, the CSTO, is basically dead. Kazakhstan is trying to use the chance of Russia's weakness to get out of Russia's sphere of influence and is eyeing and talking with China. Armenia, basically a Russian clientele state, a satellite state, was thanking the United States for the ceasefire that was negotiated with Azerbaijan, not Russia. Now, Russia might use its economic influence at the moment by turning off pipelines, especially the one to Germany. But that's a one-trick pony. That's a one-shot gun, if you want to say it this way. Once it is done, it shows every potential customer to switch his reliance to make sure he will never, ever be in a position again to be blackmailed by Russia. So his economic power that he's currently wielding will disappear forever within Europe. All in all, we need to conclude that Russia is no longer a big power. It's before the war, it still had significant soft power. It could still wield political influence with a lot of countries. Now it's abandoned by most of them. The so-called second strongest military in the world, as it was considered by many analysts and by many commentators, is now a shadow of itself and is getting beaten by the Ukrainian armed forces. From being one of the most important arms exporters, which is another term of power, as it influences nations and makes them dependent on you, its arms export will collapse. Whatever the missing of Western components because of the sanctions will have an influence, will not be all. Russia will need whatever it produced for the next few years to make up for the losses it has suffered in the last 6 months. Other than that, the Russian armed forces have made a mockery of themselves and presented their so-called superior weapons in a way that isn't really an attractive advertisement for potential buyers. But that's also not all, because the sanctions now will punish nations buying from Russia. Indonesia is a real-life example. Indonesia wanted to buy Su-35. Now they switched to Rafale. They don't want to be sanctioned just to buy some weapons. Russia, if we consider, can only be called a great power because of its nuclear weapons and the fact that it has a seat in the United Nations Security Council. That's it. De facto, there in no other way, in no real way, Russia is a great power anymore. Not in military means, not in economic means, not in political means. There is no great power Russia left anymore. So if we see the total situation, how it has changed from the beginning to the war to already now, even if Russia should be able to keep some territory within Ukraine, Russia has already lost its war because it has worsened its situation by so far that it will not be able to recover from that at any time soon. That war is lost for Russia, even if it gains some territory. That's it for now. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by the means stated in the description. And if you aren't a subscriber yet, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel. Share it to friends and acquaintances. That's also a nice way to support the channel. Hit the like button, the thumbs up. Comment, what do you think? If Russia can even recover from that regarding its demographics, etc. But there will also be a video about that fairly soon, so you can stay tuned. That's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.